Well, I had a thought in minor hockey. Of course, you can't roll the same goalie, right? Like it doesn't go over well if you have a one who never plays. And I've had a couple instances where I've had like huge difference between the two goalies, right? So one who was, top five in the league, who was bottom five in the league. And, you might have played the top one a little bit more. But I'm curious, to your point, Wally, the players figure it out first and they actually play differently in front of the weaker goalie. And I don't have to say anything, and not that I even would. I actually think they figure it out before I think, oh, maybe I should tell them to the D's to front or something like that. But I'm curious, how that would feed into your philosophy when again, you have a goalie. Like I had a goalie who was averaged 5 goals against a game in our league, which is like really not good, but you can't not play her. So how do you figure that out with your team without, the kids in the room when you're trying to say to them, okay, Sally's playing today. Let's get them. Like we can't score 6 goals if our life depended on it, right? Like, so I'm just curious because I'm sure everyone here is coached in the minor hockey realm at some point. Like that's a very hard thing to manage as a coach, I think. Because if you just say, okay, let's play the same way, let's do it. Like the players know you're full of crap. Like I'm not playing the same way if I know this player's in net. So I'm just curious people's thoughts on that. When your team is going to approach the game differently if the other goalie's in the net.
I think you'd take it as an opportunity to maybe be more conservative in your tactical choice for those games, reinforce some of your more defensive components. Maybe you move into more of a zone if that's part of your overall tactical piece. But I do agree with you, Kim, 100%. Players were certainly not going to take as many risks because they don't get the reward from doing those types of behaviors, especially neutral zone and offensively, because they always want to be back defensively to prevent. So I think that's the opportunity that maybe you take as in minor hockey, where you don't have the luxury of maybe having a full-time backup type of arrangement. At least in the male game, anyway.
Rick?
I'm on the camp that says that, yeah, there are goals that the goalie should have had, and there's an appropriate time to bring that up. In-game probably isn't it in most cases. But I take a different view. I'll throw this into the conversation. These ones that go wide, the ones that go off the bar, off the post, I always gave the goalie credit for that. And I made a point of it, that you took that away. That's all you left them. So don't feel bad that you just dodged a bullet here. You actually created that dodge. So just a different thought on things.
No, that's great. Made a miss is a big thing in goalie coaching.
Good.
You got to make a miss. It's a great point.
I guess I'd still come back to, goalies are no different than a defenseman or a center or a winger. They make mistakes. They have poor games. They make bad decisions. They struggle mentally. They're the same as any other player. And as a coach, you owe it to your team to be evaluating that as the game's going on. Kim's issue with the really subpar goalie is a bit of a different one, especially, and of course it's different at high performance situations than minor hockey. There's lots of nuance to it, but goalie's a player just like everybody else, and you need to evaluate their performance, and that's it's a part of it for me.
I think too, whenever a goalie lets in a bad goal, they know it before anybody else on the ice.
Oh, sure.
They're a pretty good judge of character. But speaking to Kim's point about having 2 goalies, I pretty much in my whole pro career played in a rotational system. So there's always, the good one, the bad one, whatever, or perceived. And you're right that players play different. And I think, it's easy if that backup goalie or the weaker goalie, we'll say for a lack of a better term, is a hard worker and one that the team likes. That makes it easy because then the girls rally around it. You're excited for big saves. Where I found it difficult is if maybe that weaker goalie or that goalie that isn't as strong isn't putting in the full effort, and the team knows it. That's what's hard, is that, how do you still, because you still want to build that goalie up, and how do you, you could see the players starting to get down. That's when negative comments creep in. It's having those one-on-one conversations with that individual player. But when you know that that other goalie also needs to pick up her game, that's tough. Like that's the toughest situation. It's not hard if that goalie is trying as hard as they can and they're just not as skilled. It's hard when they are, they could be doing more, and the players know it too. So it's, trying not to let negativity creep into the dressing room against that player. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, Kim?
No, I agree. I think it's, again, having not really coached on the male side, and this experience happened to me relatively recently. The unfortunate thing is at our level, all the stats are posted online, so everybody knows what this goalie's goals. Now, obviously, the players on the team and the parents are very aware of what the goals against are because we're living it day to day. But it is, to Malcolm's point. You can subtly make those adjustments defensively, or as we've all pointed out, the players are going to start to do that naturally on their own. But I'm very mindful of how it is in terms of the goalie's mental state. And again, this particular goalie I had, she worked as hard as, there really aren't a lot of junior players who are like, in there on easy street, not working hard, but
right.
It was interesting. And eventually we had to let her go at the end. There was no way we could bring her back because we weren't going to win a lot of games 7-5 with our goal scoring prowess. Right. So it was challenging that way, but there was no issue in the dressing room. Like you said, the girls rallied behind her, but as a goalie, she was a goalie who would make every save until she didn't make one. And then 5 would go in back to back to back to back to back. Right. And you're like, what just happened? And it happened once or twice. You're like, wow, that's crazy. And then every game it would happen like that. One broke the seal, and then we might as well have not had a goalie in the net. Right.
Right. So mentally she wasn't as strong.
Yeah. So it really was sort of fascinating. You get through a game, you get in the third period, like, oh, maybe she's going to keep it empty this time. Maybe she'll get a shutout. But if she let in 1, she'd let in 5. So interesting. But I appreciate everyone's insight. Because that doesn't happen a lot at our level, but certainly at the lower levels of minor hockey, and by that I mean younger age groups, I do think it happens quite a bit. I do think there's a stronger and a weaker, because you take the weaker just because you want a second goalie, or you need a second goalie, or the association wants you to take a second goalie. And you can imagine at the Atom level or the Pee Wee level, especially if you're B or double B, like your net might get filled if that other goalie's in the net. So anyways, I appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, Tom, go ahead. Then we'll introduce Loxie and everybody introduce themselves. Great, you could join us, Loxie.
Well,
go ahead, Tom.
Thanks, guys. Remind me of that goaltending stuff is when I was doing the Rockies team and we're playing the Minnesota Whitecaps, who hadn't lost a game all season, and they won the Clarkson Cup. And we're down in Minnesota, and I had a goalie, 3 goalies, and not one wasn't near as good as the other one, but I thought I better give her a game. So I played her against them, and she let in a bad goal about 10 minutes in. Then the rest of the game, she played so unconventionally. The rest of the game, she played great, and we ended up beating them. And they lost 2 games that whole season. They went to the Clarkson Cup and went through undefeated. And we were the only team. We beat them twice, but she won that game. So sometime you're not so good a goalie can come up with a big game for you.
You're right that the unconventional play is sometimes the hardest thing to play against. And Tom, you coached in the Vancouver Griffins?
No, it was Strathmore Rockies.
Oh, Strathmore Rockies.
Yeah, gotcha. Sam Holmes ran that team.
Gotcha. Yes.
I think Wally used to coach him too, and
yes. Interesting.
Go ahead, Wally. I don't think I remember you coaching there, Tom. That's interesting. Go ahead, Wally.
Yeah, just related to what Kim said. I don't know if she's on now, but picking a good and a bad goalie, and I'm not sure the degree of discrepancy in minor hockey. That's interesting. Might be better to have one goalie, but how do you handle that, Kim? Like when I've always dealt with players, and we're basically saying roll the lines in minor hockey, alternate the goalies in minor hockey. And who gives a damn about the score clock? And I like Malcolm's point of play better defensively when that goalie's in. It's on you to do that. You've got that discrepancy. But the idea of shortening the bench to win or playing the best goalie to win because everybody's getting frustrated over a period of time in minor hockey, you've got to know what you're there for, what you're trying to accomplish, and what you're trying to do at the expense of people's self-esteem and personal development in minor hockey. So that's my concern in minor hockey. The dilemma in pro hockey is the same as what you talked about. Who's the starter? Is it 1A, 1B, or just right now, like with Malmstrom and Riddick, it looks like a number 1A and a 3. You get caught up in the competitiveness of coaching and how you deal with and relate to those things. So that's just my point for minor hockey. And Al, you might have a comment. I don't know if you have 2 goalies in Massachusetts in U8 program or not, but Sammy Joe Small's been on, and I'm curious to see what you might have to say. Go ahead.
Yeah, Tom, is my mic on?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, from our perspective, like that's something that we can manage as a coach, right? So for my 8Us, we don't do a 8U goalie registration. We have a few kids that sometimes gravitate towards the position, and we try to make it work for them, and maybe get a few more games for them versus some of the other kids. But we kind of roll through the different kids, right? Everybody plays out, everybody plays goalie. Some kids really don't want anything to do with it, and that's fine. We don't make them play, but we manage it. When I play the stronger teams, there's a certain kid, I make sure that he's in the net for those games. And for other teams, it doesn't really matter who's in net, right? So you can kind of manage that, right? Like I'm not going to put in a kid that I know might struggle against the best team in the league. Like I got my kid for that. And for the rest of the levels that we've got, I mean, we're coaching at the A, B, and C levels. And for the most part, those teams have 2 goalies, and they kind of do it the same way, right? Like the goalie who's not playing goal for that game usually skates out. Most of them play out and goal as well, and I know those guys manage their schedules as well. If they're coming up against a strong team, they'll make sure they get the stronger goalie in, and that way it's not a drain on the team. It's not a drain on the goalie's confidence. You want to put the kids in a position where they're going to succeed.
So just one thing to add here, Wally. I think in a lot of ways, like Kim's issue, where they've got a number 1 goalie and a really, really poor number 2. At the minor levels, this is where your mission statement thing comes in. Like if you've done that exercise with your parent group and your players before the season, and they all agree that everybody, presumably development is a big part of what everybody wants to get out of it, then that gives you, the coach, permission, obviously, to play that subpar goalie, and some backing to sort of help your team work through that. So I think the mission statement thing is really, really important with this issue in particular. And to Al's point about some players wanting nothing to do with goaltending, that would be me. I don't want anything to do with being a goalie. I had the experience in Cassie's ball hockey tournament one year, Sammy. They had like a quote unquote celebrity game with the media and everything, and they needed somebody to play goal. So I was in there, and it's one of the toughest workouts I've ever had, and I was in pretty
For all the times you stood in front of the net and blocked shots, and I would think that you would love goalie.
Yeah, I was just sort of being facetious. Yeah, and I really did take a lot of pride in blocking a shot and trying to save my goalies from the odd shot.
When you're playing goal next time, you just have to pretend like somebody's behind you.
Yeah.
And you're just the defenseman blocking the shots the whole time.
I'll keep that in mind. Before Rick and Kim interject, let's